Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Application Aware Network Performance Management Radar Report 2013, Illuminating the Pipes. My name is Raleigh Gould and I will be your moderator for today's event. The two analysts who spearheaded this radar report are Enterprise Management Associates VP of Research, Jim Frey, and Enterprise Management Associates Principal Research Analyst, Tracy Corbo. Jim has over 25 years of experience in the computing industry, developing, deploying, managing, and marketing software and hardware products, with the last 20 of those years spent in network management, straddling both enterprise and service provider sectors. Tracy has 23 years of experience in the computing industry, primarily as an industry analyst and on the vendor side doing competitive analysis. Before I hand things over to Jim, I did want to mention to today's audience that today's event is being recorded and you will be receiving a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback. So be on the lookout for that email. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Jim Frey. Jim?
Thank you, Raleigh. Welcome, everybody. We are trying a bit new format here today. We're going to do this in 30 minutes. We have a huge amount of information to present to you. Here's a quick overview of the scope of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to give you a quick update on the radar report process, make sure people understand what we're doing there. We're going to talk specifically about what we focused on for this analysis, what we were looking for, what we were assigning value to, and talk a little bit about the changes that have been made since we first ran this project back in 2010, and then we'll get into doing the results and what we found and share all those with you. A quick note before I get into this, Tracy was very closely involved throughout this process, but given the short time of our webinar focus, I'm going to be doing the presentation today, and Tracy's online in case any questions come up at the end. So let's jump right in. First of all, I want to make sure everyone understands what we mean when we say radar report process. Essentially, EMA has a standard methodology whereby we look at 5 axes of evaluation against a specific functional area so that we can understand the relative strengths of each of the vendor offerings, management tool offerings, and allow us to come to a point where we can compare them and show how they rate one versus the other. The purpose, of course, is to come up with some clarity in a mixed and confusing marketplace for IT practitioners to use as a method for understanding the landscape of the network and to use as a guide for shortlisting. Specifically for the ANPM 2013, here's an illustration of our evaluation model. As you can see on the far right are the EMA radar scores that we put on the XY plot that we'll get to. In the middle, the profile scores get used to build those 5-point pentagram diagrams on a vendor-by-vendor basis. But behind that, you can see a whole bunch of additional categories and subcategories. And it goes all the way back down to the questionnaires, which is where we draw most of the data in from the vendor providers themselves, where we have literally hundreds upon hundreds of actually scored and rated variables that we use in this analysis. We're going to talk a lot about where we emphasized on the way through here. So let me first start, though, by making sure everyone understands our definition of ANPM, or Application Aware Network Performance Management. What we're really looking at is management technologies that bring application visibility from the network perspective and are, by and large, used initially or deployed initially by the network team. Why we think this is important is this viewpoint, this context that can be delivered to the network management function, to network management practices, to the network management organization, and to organizations on a broader basis is really important because it is the tying together point. It's the connection point between network infrastructure and that which the network is there to deliver, which is applications and services. So understanding exactly what's driving the network is essential for putting in context whether or not the network is delivering and providing its role as expected within the organization, but also, more importantly, for helping to zero in on where problems may exist, whether or not they exist in the network. And it really ties into something that EMA has been tracking for some time here, which is this slow, steady convergence of the IT operations function into a cross-domain sort of organization and process and practice set that largely focuses as its key indicators on application activity and application performance. So ANPM allows networking management technologies and networking management and engineering professionals to align and orient what they see and do with these integrated cross-domain operations objectives. For our study here, we looked at 3 common driving use cases for the type of technology that we looked at, and they're listed here: capacity planning, sustained monitoring, and troubleshooting. Now, that's not necessarily in the order of most common usage. I'd have to shuffle that a little bit. We're going to talk about that today, but certainly troubleshooting is the driving use case for most folks who embrace and deploy this technology and the way that they use it most often across the board. They do use all 3, but troubleshooting ends up coming out on top. And I want to talk a little bit also about there's something of a continuum that we've watched and I've watched over the years and tried to figure out where things fit versus. So at one end of the continuum is the traditional infrastructure-oriented performance management tools. These tended to be SNMP-based. They still are today. At the far end of the spectrum, this continuum, if you will, is traditional application performance management or monitoring, APM. What we're looking at here are some things that fall kind of in between those 2 extremes. And most of it is what we've been calling application awareness in network performance management. There's a slight variant I'm going to mention here, and this I would call network-based APM. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is that we found in this study that there are a number of traditional APM technologies that happen to be, for instance, packet monitoring based, that are being migrated into solutions and actually starting to satisfy some of the criteria we look for in ANPM solutions. We have a couple specific examples of that that we found in this research, and I'm going to point out as we go forward. So underneath, the next layer down, what's the technology that makes this possible? We look at 4 primary types of data sets that provide the visibility that's needed in an ANPM solution. They're listed here: packet inspection, looking actually at the headers and the payloads of the packets as they go by, collecting flow records. NetFlow is the best known example of this, but there are many others. There's JFlow, CFlow, NetStream, SFlow, and then of course the standard IPFix. Another way to gather application activity information from the network perspective. And then there are a couple of other complementary sources. Synthetic agents, examples here might be standalone, robotic testers. IPSLA is a great example of this. Many people understand and know about that. And then log file analysis. There's certain application-specific details that can only be found in syslogs that are very helpful in many cases with recognizing problems and with troubleshooting problems. But I want to shift real quickly and say, importantly here, the criteria for inclusion for us in this particular analysis is that you had to have the systems and the solutions that we reviewed had to have NetFlow, XFlow, or a packet inspection data source technology in order for us to be included. The other sources are there. They're great. They fill in gaps. It's our contention that those typically are not a basis for ANPM sorts of capabilities. They are certainly a bonus. Now, I'll probably get a few calls after this presentation refuting that point, but this was the basis for our study here, and partly it was also to help us narrow the field a little bit and focus on what are commonly looked at as alternatives for ANPM solutions. We did a multi-step research process, and this is standard of all radars, but there was a slight twist and variation for us this year as we've continued to tune the EMA standard radar practice. We certainly start with our understanding of the marketplace and who all the technology providers are. We invite technology providers to contribute to this. We engage with them in dialogue to learn details of how their solutions work and what they can do. And then we go out and we talk to actual real live end users of the products to find out the value that they're actually getting from the products and find out exactly how they put them into use. So in this particular project, we started out with our initial outreach to over 50 providers that we felt could potentially meet the inclusion criteria. We had 28 who agreed to contribute data back to us. 24 of them completed. A couple dropped out along the way for various reasons. And there's one that we're going to talk about today, number 25, that is worth still talking about. And then just for this particular project, we did over 40 end customer calls and reference discussions, interviews to find out exactly how these tools are being used, who's using them in the organizations, how they're connected up to other tools, where the value is seen, what were the most useful capabilities, and so on. Now, I say 40 plus because this is not the only source of data we use. We also use the ongoing dialogues that EMA holds based on all the other project activity we have, the other research we have going on. And so the actual number of data points contributing to this is far more than 40. It's probably on the order of 60 or 80 in terms of actual customer experiences that we use to advise our evaluation process. So key changes, a couple important things have changed since the last time we did a radar on this topic. Part of this reflects a shift that's happening in the EMA radar model. And a few of these are shifts that are happening specific to the ANPM analysis. So first of all, you might have noticed on that earlier slide, the XY chart that you're going to see that you saw there, and you'll see when we get to the results here today. We've changed the name from cost efficiency to resource efficiency. And this is a very important shift to recognize and understand. What we've done is we've done much more standardized and rigorous analysis of the complexity of systems, as well as looking at the cost of procuring and deploying systems from a number of different viewpoints. So we built a much richer model for understanding the cost aspects of these solutions. In general, within this category, we are always going to assign higher numeric scores to solutions that are quick to deploy, have a simplicity in terms of the architecture of the product, and that are quick to learn and use and don't require a whole lot of time to get up to speed on. Those sort of general figures, and of course the other key variable, if they are relatively cheap, they're going to get a higher score too, although it's a multivariable analysis to understand the cost from a licensing perspective. Now, the other axis, the y-axis on our XY plot chart, we have changed from product strength to solution impact. And this reflects a couple of important shifts in the way we're conducting these analyses. So first of all, a lot of the solutions that were brought to us and presented to us involve a large, long list of products in order to get there. Past radars didn't really take into account fully how much the integration between those pieces was being done, how tightly they were integrated. We instead looked more at breadth than depth, more at a span of coverage than tightness of integration. So we shifted some of the rankings and the scoring a little bit to look more towards better integration as an important part. Not simply, all fingers in all the holes in the dike, but also can they all fit on one boy. So another important thing that we evolved and added was some additional detail around emerging environments, things that have to do with virtual compute and cloud settings. And then finally, I want to add here that we really focused much more heavily than we did in the past on understanding exactly how these three use cases are being met: the capacity planning, sustained monitoring, and the troubleshooting use cases. And we wrapped that reference customer information back in directly as a means to validate whether or not the values in those areas were being achieved. So now, enough waiting, let's get to the results. But before I put the first chart up here, I want to talk about the general findings that we had. So the general findings, first off, this is something we've known for a while, but it came through really strong in all of the reference calls we did. Troubleshooting is the strongest driving use case for these tools. It is what everybody does with these tools. I mean, almost bar none. In fact, I don't think I had a single call where we didn't talk about how these tools are being used for troubleshooting problems. And this is regardless of the underlying technology, whether it's NetFlow, XFlow, or it's packets. Capacity planning came in second, was being used by about half of the folks we talked to, maybe a little more. Monitoring used a little less than half, and the fascinating thing was that there was very little use of alarming as part of monitoring. Let's see here. Now, second general finding is that the field of solution providers really continues to change. We see new entrants here that are focusing specifically on NetFlow and XFlow. We also see new solutions coming in that are based on packets. So this is quite interesting. There's still quite a bit of new and fresh solutions coming into the marketplace here. Hybrid solutions, though, are definitely the most common case. It's not by a huge margin, but especially at the higher end of the market. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Hybrid meaning that it's bringing together both the NetFlow, Xflow, and the packet-based viewpoints. Now, there is, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, there's a new crop. We had a number of solution providers come and say, all right, we've got a network-based, application-aware, perhaps NetFlow-based solution, and we're going to draw, and we've drawn in APM tools from other parts of the company that have packet-based awareness. So they're designed to be used to monitor end-user activity, and they're used to, for instance, capture and measure and present metrics on response times. So these sort of real user monitoring or end user experience management technologies are network centric in that they oftentimes are operating on packets. They're being brought together with a traditional network management platform to collectively create an ANPM-like solution. So there's several of those that came up, and we're going to point those out as we talk through the results here shortly. The other trend that's generally happening in the marketplace, and we don't have a lot of these present, there's a few. In general, network management platforms have been adding extensions for NetFlow mostly over the last few years, and they are more and more popping up and saying, "Hey, these capabilities are starting to progress to a point where they can be used, much more regularly as an ongoing monitoring tool and or as a deeper troubleshooting tool, and it really starts to address what we're seeking in the ANPM use cases." So you get a little bit more of that going on as well. I did want to point out an interesting finding, sort of an ad hoc finding. We found a lot of folks that were using the NetFlow side of monitoring of ANPM solutions. I would say a majority now have moved over, and some of them completely, to NetFlow v9. So this was not the case even a short time ago. NetFlow v9 was still a significant minority, but just, again, this is not scientific, but an ad hoc finding was an awful lot of v9 NetFlow out there. And ultimately, what we found was, amongst the 24 solutions, there was a fairly clean dividing line between them in terms of those that had been designed for and typically targeted very large enterprise and or service provider telco environments versus the group that was really built for the mid-tier and below. And so what we ended up doing was dividing the solutions into two groups, and we did the actual radar analysis and comparative analyses in these two subgroups. So small and medium deployments, these are solutions that are either they're architected and scaled to handle relatively smaller environments compared to the group on the right, which are architected to handle very, very large environments. One other interesting thing about this, the entire list on the right-hand side of the large and SP deployments, every single one of these solutions we would call a hybrid solution, meaning it's doing both NetFlow and packet-based analysis. Only two on the left-hand side could be called hybrid. So there's another sort of dividing line we found, which is that for the most part, these big hybrid solutions are worthy of grouping in one set of analyses, and the others are going to be done in a like comparison on the small-medium side. Okay, so enough waiting. Here's our first radar chart. This is for the large and service provider deployments group. As you can see, we have a pretty good clustering in the middle towards the upper right. We had 4 vendors that actually achieved the value leader designation: Riverbed, NetScout, Network Instruments, and Fluke Networks. And then we have a big group that is clustered and spread across the strong value band. So we're going to talk about each of these in detail. So I'm going to move right on to the value leader category. And these are being presented in terms of highest solution impact scores first. So the highest solution impact score in the value leader category was Riverbed. Now Riverbed is here in many ways because of their recent move to acquire AppNeta and to include a substantial depth of ANPM capabilities together and match it up with the existing Cascade product lines that were part of Riverbed. There still is work going on to integrate these, and so honestly that did affect their resource efficiency score negatively, at least in the short run, while they work on figuring out how to bring all these pieces together. But collectively, it brought them into a position where they had a very significant scope of impact of their solution. And one other thing to point out here, really the only solution provider that we looked at here that had in related product lines, direct control and optimization technologies, and this, of course, is the core of the Riverbed business. But it also gives them an ability to address and bring to market closed-loop capabilities that are not directly available in other solutions. Not that other solutions don't have means for doing such things, they just don't own the technology that does the direct control and optimization in the way Riverbed does. Okay, next was NetScout Systems. And NetScout, the things I definitely wanted to point out here, they're of course long considered market leader in this sector, but really what I wanted to point out was they brought to us some of the most sophisticated users in terms of the way that the products were being applied across all three of our use cases. In fact, they brought one of the few folks that we talked to, that I've talked to in quite some time, who was really aggressively using alerting and alarming out of some of these products. They also, it's something I want to point out that a lot of folks don't recognize or know about NetScout is that there are NetFlow solutions in the NetScout portfolio, and there's quite substantial adoption and usage of that. We've had quite a few conversations with folks who are using NetScout for doing their NetFlow collection. Next was Network Instruments. Network Instruments scored very, very well here and has a very broad solution. They have included and added to the system or to the solution as a whole SNMP and Xflow and IPSLA through the Observer Infrastructure products. But most of the conversations we had were really focused first and foremost on job one, which is the deep retrospective troubleshooting that's available by using the combination of the Gigastore products and the Observer products. So that's really the heart and soul of the values for Network Instruments. They're slowly getting more adoption of the complementary data sets that they do also support and offer support for. Fluke Networks also showed up as a value leader, and here largely because of the progress marked by their recent announcement of the Visual TrueView product. Visual TrueView is an integrated unified appliance where they've included packet monitoring technology, packet storage, NetFlow, Xflow, and SNMP all in a single appliance at 10G rated and verified capacity. So this brought together several independent products that were available under the Visual Networks brand. It's now renamed Fluke. It was Fluke, then it was Visual Networks. Now it's Fluke again. So enough poking fun at them for their brand changes. Essentially what they did was they really did a pretty aggressive job of consolidating products into this single architecture. And that raised them up in a number of ways in terms of their total score and got them into the value leader category. So in the strong value, a bunch of these very good solutions that landed in the strong value category. Top solution impact was CA Technologies. They were very high scoring the last time we did this analysis as well. They have a broad solution that covers all aspects of performance management, including the ANPM type data sources. This includes NetFlow, Xflow. Packet for them is a combination of products that their APA product, as well as the resell they do, the OEM they do of the Gigastore products. Compuware also came out very high in terms of solution impact. And here, Compuware has continued to promote and evolve a pretty sophisticated set of application-oriented network performance management data sets and capabilities. They have really set this into and locked it into their broader APM story. Now, this would actually not be a case that I had mentioned earlier of someone bringing end-user experience monitoring into the networking world. It's more the other way around, where they've taken a network-based viewpoint of application awareness, either whether their own products or from third-party instrumentation, and then welded that in tightly into a higher-level APM story. Next, we had InfoVista. InfoVista is definitely worthy of note in that they have a very rich set of capabilities, both for the NetFlow, XFlow, as well as packet-based monitoring. Very flexible platform, very scalable platform, designed for the needs of the of large service providers. Has also found some great traction within the enterprise community. Lancope has historically been mostly based on NetFlow and XFlow sort of technologies, although they can do packet inspection and do enhanced NetFlow as a way to add additional details where NetFlow or XFlow is not available and or where you simply want additional details. Now, the interesting thing about Lancope is they have always been a dual use case sort of solution, and led largely with the strength of the security monitoring capabilities of the solution. And yet a lot of the folks who adopt their products end up using them also in parallel for ANPM capabilities. This is more from the the network and application monitoring side of things. Let's see. Next we had HP. HP actually is an example of one of those solutions that went and took their RUM product in this case from the APM portfolio and brought it over and worked on integrating it with their network side, NetFlow and XFlow capability. That's part of the NNM suite, the Network Node Manager suite. Now, this is one case where it's a relatively early in the market for having this out there. We did not get a good chance to validate this combination anywhere, and so HP's total product impact or total solution impact score is lower than it could possibly have been. It could have been higher, and we expect that their score may go up in the future when we refresh this research. Once there's been a chance for more folks to actually deploy this combination of tools and start telling us about how they actually saw values out of it. SEV1 is also a case where they have just added packet monitoring to what is at the core, arguably the most scalable SNMP and NetFlow collection architecture on the market today. And that's the core of SEV1's solution, is this massively scalable architecture, their ability to easily add additional data sets. They came to us and told us they have added now some packet monitoring capabilities, but as with HP, we did not have an opportunity to talk to anyone and validate and find out how that really was working out for them. So expect upon refresh, when we refresh this research next time, that the solution impact for SEV1 will likely rise. EMC is a provider that a lot of folks won't know about or recognize. They have just arrived into this sector via the recent acquisition of Watch4Net. And the Watch4Net platform, which was built as a performance management tool to complement EMC Smarts, actually has within it some pretty rich capabilities around NetFlow and XFlow monitoring. They have light packet monitoring as well, which extends a little bit of the visibility, especially helps on the troubleshooting use case. But it's the NetFlow XFlow, which is the core of what they're primarily offering around the monitoring and capacity planning. Now, one interesting thing here, we had probably one of our best reference calls was with well, what's the best way to describe this? A Fortune 20 company that is using this platform and really very thrilled with the value they're getting out of this NetFlow monitoring. WildPackets rounds out this group, and WildPackets continues to be incredibly solid and steady around packet analysis and troubleshooting, really focused on that use case. They have other capabilities in the solution as well for doing monitoring, for doing capacity planning, but by and large, most of the folks that we've talked to really love WildPackets specifically for the flexibility and power of the troubleshooting that can be done. And that's really the core strength that we see from WildPackets. Okay, so moving on to the other group. This is the small and medium deployments group. Again, you can see we had a distribution. We had a few folks that worked their way up into the value leader category, and we had a big group that were spread out around the strong value band. So again, starting with the value leader group at the highest solution impact scores. AppNeta was at the top of the list here, and AppNeta is significant for a couple of reasons. They are a unique architecture in that they have a SaaS backend for central management. They do have an on-prem model, but it's even on-prem, the company actually does all the administration of that backend. So you get sort of an on-prem SaaS model, which is really kind of unique. But I think the most important thing here is that they really have significantly expanded the scope of ANPM features and functions in the solution, largely because since we last did this analysis, they've added packet inspection and packet capture capabilities and much richer analysis in the application detail that they can provide because of adding these new capabilities to their solution. And that elevated them significantly on the solution impact scale. ExtraHop is in this group too. Some people might wonder why ExtraHop was not in the large deployments group. Frankly, they were on the bubble, and we like 12 and 12. And that's part of the reason why they're in this group. The other reason really is that when we looked at the folks that were adopting the ExtraHop products, they tended to be in the mid-tier. Now, these are really demanding mid-tier organizations. They tend to be e-commerce, and those organizations very heavily focused on network-enabled applications and business. So they turn to and look at ExtraHop as a means to provide a really deep and rich detail up at the top layer of the stack. And so ExtraHop qualifies as, what I mentioned earlier, almost more of a network-based APM solution because of the focus they have in the upper layers of the stack. Along the way, they do definitely provide additional detail down the stack. And one of the unique capabilities I wanted to call out here is, perhaps partly because of their F5 heritage, they have added the ability to do, I think, a unique ability to decrypt traffic at line rate for analysis. And that's pretty unusual in this class of products. AccelOps is the other one that rounds out this group. And now AccelOps used to be a SaaS-based monitoring product play. They've switched now to an on-prem optional model. We were really impressed with the scalability as well as in conversation with the folks who are using their products, the strength of what they've been doing with NetFlow and XFlow. They complement this. A lot of what AccelOps does is based on log file analysis and on infrastructure monitoring, but the NetFlow and XFlow capabilities ended up being a very complementary piece to their story and won them some significant additional scoring points. In the strong value group, highest of the solution impact was SolarWinds. SolarWinds is, of course, stalwart in the NetFlow and XFlow monitoring sector. And a lot of things we heard from the folks we talked to was not just about that, but around the rest of the capabilities in the broader SolarWinds suite and how the NetFlow and XFlow features became an important complement to everything else that they were getting through the broader suite. Xerion, you might not have heard of. They're not as well known, but they actually are an example of someone who has a broader management platform. I'm calling it BSM here. It's a very service-oriented, multi-domain platform, but along the way, they've added some very rich NetFlow and XFlow capabilities on top of that. And we talked to some folks who are finding great value in that specifically, that set of features specifically as part of their broader service management-oriented operations. Ipswitch, and this is the What's the Goal products, it came in real close to this group here, definitely seeing fast adoption rates and expansion of the NetFlow and XFlow solutions. And we were impressed, by the way, with scalability for these guys too. They had quite a nice story to tell about how well they could deploy and how they could keep up and grow with organizations that were using their solutions. Dell comes in here. Now this group of products was formerly the Quest product line and was covered in the last radar that we did as Quest. This is the Foglight products. This is an example of one of those solutions, like I mentioned earlier, HP, where they're bringing end user experience monitoring to complement what they had in the traditional network management platform of Foglight NMS, which was NetFlow and XFlow capabilities, and some packet inspection for the purposes of generating NetFlow records, but really more focused on NetFlow XFlow. And so it's an aggregate solution. Here again is a case where this is a relatively early stage in these kind of combined scenarios. So we couldn't assign the full value of what possibly the possible solution impact of value of this because we haven't seen the developed and confirmed use cases of the combined solution yet. So expect them to move up. Plixer, I want to mention here, comes into the middle of this group. Very, very solid solution, very focused on getting the absolute most possible out of NetFlow and XFlow and IPFix. And I want to point out, by the way, Plixer has also started to add security use cases on top of the same platform. So they are recognizing an opportunity to deliver value to multiple audiences. Rounding out the strong value group, we've got another couple more here. iTrinegy, their product called AppQoS, is a packet monitoring solution, and it's a pretty solid, pretty rich set of capabilities, very much aimed at mid-tier MSP. iTrinegy based out of the UK. NetOptics has two products that are relevant here. One that came through an acquisition, and another one that they built on their own. So Spike that came from Nmetrics, and AppTap that they built on their own. Both primarily packet-based. They do have some support for NetFlow, Xflow. We had some great conversations with some folks using these products in various different ways. Help Systems Intermapper. Now, you might not have heard of Help Systems before because they just moved into the network management space by acquiring the Intermapper product from Dartware. So most folks have heard of Intermapper. Here's another example of a broader platform that has added some rich NetFlow and Xflow features into this broader platform. So good, solid capabilities and visibility, excellent for in particular troubleshooting use cases, but fits into a larger solution that also does mapping and broad-based infrastructure monitoring. And last year, but certainly not least, Solana Networks has relatively recently, just in the last couple months, announced a product called Sparrow IQ, released this product. It's still pretty new in the marketplace, so here's another example where they didn't get all of the credit that they might be worthy of getting, but over time, as they get a little bit more time in the field with this, their score will improve. But the interesting thing here is it's a very powerful and very good set of ANPM capabilities, but specifically packaged and priced for SMB, even below small medium enterprise, and I think very successfully done so. All right, so before we wrap up, two last things. First of all, I want to mention player number 25. This is one that went through the whole process. We talked to them at length. We could not figure out a way to accurately fit them into our evaluation model because they're just a little different. Boundary is what we would call, is another example of an NAPM solution. They do packet analysis from the VNIC perspective. They work as an agent installed on VMs, looking at the VNICs. They attach themselves to VMs, so they follow the VMs around and follow the virtual workloads, whether it's inside a virtualized data center or out in the cloud somewhere. They've done some very cool stuff to automate deployment through config and development platforms like Puppet and Chef. And what they do is they have a SaaS backend. They harvest metrics every single second. So this really, the thing that I really think is innovative and interesting about this is that it arguably is one of the best approaches I've seen to solve the cloud monitoring enigma, which is how do you figure out exactly what's happening with workloads that are moving to and from a cloud. If there's any sort of hybrid architectures, you want to know what's happening with each of the elements and understand the network viewpoint and network activity of each of these VMs. Boundary's got a way to do that. But they didn't fit our model, and we didn't think it would be fair to throw them into this side-by-side analysis. So we just want to point them out as an interesting and intriguing alternative. Okay, some special recognitions here as we wrap up. 5 of them. The first one is AppNeta. We've seen, as I mentioned, such significant expansion in scope of capabilities with AppNeta that we wanted to recognize them with the most significant advancement award since the 2010 radar. Fluke Networks with their new TrueView product, truly unified appliance, more capabilities in a single box than we see anywhere else in the market right now, and so we're recognizing them as the best hybrid ANPM solution at this time. Plixer, given their drive, their leadership in driving the evolution and use cases for NetFlow and Xflow and IPFix, we want to recognize them as Xflow champion for this ANPM radar report. Riverbed actually, sort of by combining the capabilities that were a part of UpNet with the things that had already been going on with Cascade, collectively had the most powerful set of features for supporting virtualization and cloud sort of environments. And so we wanted to recognize Riverbed as having currently best virtualization support in ANPM. And finally, Solana, last folks we talked about on the second chart, just by being very innovative and bringing powerful packet-based analysis into a package and price point that can be achieved and reached by the absolute low end of the market, SMB, and get access to this kind of technology for the first time, in our eyes, warrants recognition as the most affordable SMB solution. Okay, so let's wrap up, do a summary here. I think as we look at this and we look at the results and we look forward and we look back both, there's a couple things I want everyone to take away. One is we really see this is a very dynamic sector. There's new entrants coming in. There's still innovation being driven through this. There's a lot of competition. That's great for everyone out there because it means there's more capabilities being added all the time. We have this continuum also, which is a factor in this sector. Other analyst firms have struggled with this in figuring out how to subdivide this. I'm still focusing mostly on ANPM because there's a certain set of use cases that make sense in ANPM, and they're really separate from, they're complementary in many cases, but separate from the true use cases of APM. There's this middle ground in between them, and that's what we're going to watch as we see folks who have been traditional APM players or traditional network management players find a way to move to the middle here and start crossing this divide between the two. We'll keep watching that and trying to analyze and report on that as we go along. So a quick view, where are we with ANPM today? The troubleshooting cases definitely are still the dominant driving forces behind buying and deploying these tools. Capacity planning is quite common. It's certainly not ubiquitous, but it's quite common. And monitoring is really the area of opportunity for improvement, particularly when it comes to alerting and alarming. I seriously, of the folks that I talked to in this project, and this is the last 3 weeks we did these 40 calls, I can count on one hand the number of people who actually were using alerting and alarming out of these systems. They all know it's there, but they're not using it for a variety of different reasons, some of which I'll talk about in a moment here next. But I think at this point, ANPM today, there still is a need for, and there's value for both of the primary data sets we've talked about, both packet inspection as well as Xflow, NetFlow. Now, where's this going? We see continued integration into that combined integrated IT operations concept and role and function that we talked about earlier on today. We also see, and here's where the opportunity is around monitoring, a lot of the solutions in here have some very powerful real-time analytics. The challenge for the market is to get folks to pick them up and use them, to find use cases and advocate for use cases where these higher level functions, these higher level processing capabilities can be brought to bear so that important key essential metrics can be elevated into the real-time monitoring, the real-time alerting and alarming stage, and taken advantage of in real time as opposed to just being there to turn to when a problem manifests itself. And lastly, I think it's important to comment here on where we think this continuum is between NetFlow, Xflow, and packet inspection and what we see happening. Because of the increased rate of adoption of NetFlow v9, the technology stage is set in many ways for folks to start using the more advanced capabilities in NetFlow to start providing some of the things that they would have relied on packet monitoring to give them. But that being said, it's still early. There's still a lot of challenges ahead to get that deployed and adopted. The path is there, but it will take some time to get down that path. Over time, there will be more use cases that can be met with advanced NetFlow versus what would have required packet monitoring, but there will still be use cases where packet inspection will never be replaced. So the pendulum may swing a bit, but in general, it's my view that the general adoption and market growth is going to make both of these sectors grow because they both add significant and differential value opportunities. So with that, thanks. I think I've completely run out of time for questions, so I'm going to hand it back over to you, Rolly.
Thanks, Jim. Yes, unfortunately, we have run out of time for Q&A today, but we did want to make sure Jim was able to present all this great data that he and Tracy uncovered in their research. So thank you for hanging on with us. I will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow that will include the on-demand playback, and also email all of you when the report is final. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.